My brother showed up at my doorstep and declared, "Since you're rich now, buy me a house, it's the least you can do." When I refused, he scoffed, "Then I'll just move into yours instead." I pulled out a legal notice, smiled, and said, "Funny, because you're about to be banned from ever stepping foot here again." I grew up in Austin, Texas, in a modest neighborhood where everyone knew each other. My brother Jake and I had different personalities. I was focused on my studies, while Jake was more carefree, relying on his charm to get by. Our parents hoped he would find his path eventually. After years of hard work, I secured a well-paying job at a tech company in Silicon Valley. This allowed me to buy a comfortable home back in Austin, a place I envisioned for family gatherings. One hot afternoon, as I was settling into my new house, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Jake standing there with a duffel bag, smiling. "Hey, big shot," he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "Nice place you've got here." "Thanks, Jake. What brings you by?" I asked, though I had a feeling I knew the answer. He sat on the couch, making himself comfortable. "Well, since you're doing so well now, I figured you could help your little brother out. Buy me a house, it's the least you can do." I was surprised by his boldness. "Excuse me? Come on," he continued, gesturing around. "You've got this big house all to yourself. I'm stuck in a tiny apartment, barely making ends meet. It's only fair you share the wealth." I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Jake, I've worked hard for what I have. I'm not in a position to buy you a house." He leaned back, smirking. "Then I'll just move into yours instead." That was too much. I walked over to a drawer, pulled out a document, and handed it to him. "Funny, because you're about to be banned from ever stepping foot here again." Jake looked confused as he read the restraining order. "You're kidding me." "Not at all," I replied firmly. "Your sense of entitlement has crossed the line. This is my home, and I won't be manipulated into giving you something you haven't earned." He stood up, angry. "Mom and Dad will hear about this." "Feel free to tell them," I said, opening the door. "But my decision stands. Please leave." Jake stormed out, and as the door closed behind him, I felt a mix of sadness and relief. Family ties are strong, but they don't justify exploitation. I hoped this would be a wake-up call for Jake to take responsibility for his own life. In the following weeks, there were tense conversations with our parents, who initially sided with Jake. But as they understood the full story, they recognized the importance of boundaries and self-reliance. This experience taught me that success can sometimes attract unwarranted expectations, even from those closest to us. Standing firm and setting clear boundaries isn't just about protecting what you've earned, it's about encouraging others to find their own path and achievements. 2 days after Jake stormed out, I started getting texts from my mom. Long ones. Guilt-heavy. Stuff like, "He's your brother," and "You're being cruel to family." Then came the calls. She left voicemails crying, saying she didn't raise her sons to turn on each other. It hit hard, but I didn't respond. I needed space to think. Jake wasn't done, though. The next weekend, I came home from a quick grocery run and saw his car in the driveway. I froze. I had a security system, but I hadn't activated the motion alerts because I assumed no one would be stupid enough to ignore a legal order. I was wrong. I unlocked the front door slowly. Jake was inside, sitting at my kitchen table, eating my leftovers like it was the most normal thing in the world. "You changed the locks," he said, mouth full of my lasagna. "But I remembered you always keep a spare under the flower pot." I stared at him. "You're trespassing. I'm calling the cops." He put his fork down slowly and stood up. "Do it," he said. "Let's see how Mom feels when her favorite son gets dragged out in cuffs because his rich brother won't let him crash for a few days." I held the phone in my hand. I wanted to call. I needed to. But the guilt gnawed at me. I didn't press the button. "You think you're better than everyone now, huh?" he sneered. "You weren't even the smart one. I just didn't play the game. That's the difference. You sold out. Get out." I said. My voice shook. He walked past me, real slow. Like he was in control. On his way out, he muttered, "You'll regret this." The next morning, I found a dead bird on my doorstep. I called the cops immediately. The officer who came out didn't take it seriously. "Could be random," he said. "Cats leave stuff like that. You know how it is." I knew Jake. That wasn't a cat. Then my boss called. Apparently someone emailed the HR department pretending to be me. Claimed I was quitting. Said I had a breakdown, blamed the stress, even attached a fake resignation letter. Luckily, HR called to confirm. I denied it, obviously. But I knew who did it. I changed every password. Set up extra security on my email, bank, even the doorbell cam. I filed a police report with a copy of the restraining order violation. Still, they didn't do much. They said unless there was proof Jake had sent the email or left the bird, their hands were tied. It got worse. My car tires were slashed the next week. Not all 4, just 2. Enough to make sure insurance wouldn't cover it. A subtle punishment. I had to call out of work to get it towed. I lost money. Time. Sanity. Then Jake made it official. He filed a small claims case against me. Said I owed him for emotional damages and family promises. He tried to twist my words, things I said years ago like, "One day I'll take care of us." He said that meant I agreed to buy him a house. I laughed when I got the court papers. But it wasn't funny. I still had to respond. Still had to show up. Still had to see him there, acting like the victim, telling the judge how I abandoned him, how I was cutting ties with blood. And then, while all this chaos was happening, my mom showed up at my house. She was crying. Not just sad. Shaking. She said Jake told her he was suicidal. That I was pushing him to the edge. That if anything happened to him, it would be on me. That night I didn't sleep. Not because I believed him, but because I knew how far he'd go. This wasn't just about money anymore. He wanted to destroy me piece by piece. 2 weeks after the court hearing, I was starting to feel like maybe things had calmed down. Jake lost the case, obviously. The judge dismissed it after 15 minutes. No evidence, no agreement, no claim. I thought that would be the end of it. But Jake doesn't stop when he loses. He just shifts tactics. I got a letter in the mail from Child Protective Services. At first I thought it was some kind of mix-up. I don't have kids. Never have. But it had my name, my address, and said I was being investigated for unsafe living conditions affecting minors. I called the number on the letter immediately, thinking maybe someone was using my identity, or it was meant for someone else. The woman on the phone was polite but firm. "We received an anonymous tip. We have to investigate all claims. We'll be visiting your residence within 48 hours. I was stunned. I sat there with the phone still in my hand long after the call ended. Jake. It had to be Jake. The next day, 2 CPS workers showed up. I let them in. They walked through my house, looked at everything. I kept things neat, clean, organized. I told them I lived alone. One of them asked, "Are you sure no children have been here recently?" That one question made my stomach flip. Jake had used my house. I checked the security cam footage from the time he broke in, something I hadn't fully watched before, just skimmed. This time, I went through every second. At one point, he was carrying a toddler. A little girl, maybe 3 years old, on his hip. I didn't know who she was. I still don't. But he brought her in, sat her on my couch, let her eat something out of the fridge, then left 20 minutes later with her. It wasn't just about harassing me anymore. He was trying to plant a narrative. And it worked for a while. CPS marked the case as no evidence, but the whole process stayed on record. I had to give my work HR a heads up just in case they heard something. I couldn't believe how far Jake was willing to go. I confronted my mom. I showed her the footage. She sat there in silence for a long time, watching her son carry a random child into my home. "I don't know what's wrong with him," she whispered. But that was the problem. She always said she didn't know. Never did anything. That week, I decided I couldn't wait for him to ruin something else. I hired a lawyer to push for a permanent restraining order. Not just a simple notice. This one would make any future contact a criminal offense. Jake didn't show up to the hearing. But he didn't need to. He left something else behind. When I got home from the courthouse, my front yard was trashed. Paint thrown across the windows. Slurs written on the garage door. A dead squirrel nailed to the mailbox. Yes, nailed. I filed the report. Again. But this time, I had him. I checked the footage from the new camera I installed above the garage, facing the street. It was grainy, but clear enough. Jake's car. Jake's walk. Jake's face. The idiot didn't even wear a mask. I handed it to the cops, along with the time-stamped video, and my lawyer took it from there. Jake was arrested for vandalism and violation of the restraining order. That got real attention. Finally. I should have felt relief. I didn't. I felt sick. Because even after everything, my mom still called. Still cried. Still begged me to forgive, and talk to him, and work this out as a family. But Jake didn't want family. He wanted power. He wanted control. And now that I was fighting back, he was losing it. But this wasn't over. Because even from behind bars, Jake was planning something. And I could feel it. A week after Jake got arrested, I got a letter from his lawyer. It was short. Just a few lines. But it hit hard. Jake was pressing charges against me for emotional distress. He was claiming I had caused his mental breakdown, ruined his reputation, and turned the family against him. It was laughable, but also disgusting. It wasn't about winning. It was about dragging me through more legal hell. But I had reached my limit. This time, I fought back properly. I gave everything to my lawyer. Every email. Every voicemail. Every text where he threatened me, guilt-tripped me, or hinted at what he'd do. I gave him the CPS letters, the video footage, even the recordings I'd made of phone calls when Jake started escalating. We filed a countersuit. I sued Jake for harassment, fraud, defamation, and property damage. My lawyer said it was solid. But that wasn't the twist. The real twist came 2 days before the court date. A woman showed up at my door. Her name was Alicia. She was holding a toddler. My stomach sank. She said she was Jake's ex. She said she was sorry to show up like this, but she had nowhere else to go. Jake had disappeared after he got out on bail. Left her with unpaid rent, maxed out credit cards in her name, and no way to contact him. She said Jake told her I was rich and owed him a house. She said he promised to move her and their daughter into my place once he handled a few things. That little girl? The one in the CPS video? She was real. His daughter. And he used her like a prop. I didn't know what to say. I let her in. Gave her some water. She broke down crying. I didn't feel sorry for Jake anymore. I felt fury. Not rage. Not frustration. Something cold. Something steady. She gave me something, too. She handed over Jake's old phone. Said he left it behind when he fled. It still worked. I took it to my lawyer. Inside the phone were text messages, voice memos, screenshots. Jake bragging to his friends. Laughing about what he was doing to me. How he was teaching me a lesson. How he wanted to ruin the rich nerd's life. He even recorded himself describing how he used his daughter to set me up. It was over after that. We gave the phone to the police. Jake's bail got revoked. He was picked up in a neighboring town, hiding out at a buddy's place. When he saw me in court again, this time in handcuffs, he didn't look smug. He looked small. Hollow. My countersuit went through. The court ruled in my favor. Jake was ordered to pay restitution. He wouldn't, of course, he had no money. But now he had a criminal record. Multiple. And he couldn't come near me again without risking serious jail time. Alicia stayed in town. I helped her find a shelter at first. Then, after a while, helped her get into a small apartment. She never asked for anything. She just wanted peace for her daughter. My mom barely speaks to me now. She says I destroyed the family. But honestly, that family was cracked long before I said no to buying someone a house. I made mistakes too. I let guilt talk louder than logic. I ignored the signs. I didn't push back hard enough, soon enough. But I learned. I don't believe blood alone makes someone family anymore. You earn that. Through respect. Through loyalty. Through effort. Jake wanted to break me. He failed. I didn't just protect my home. I ended the game he started. And I did it with facts, proof, and a silence that hurt more than shouting ever could.